Welcome to the Raise a Flag audio guide. Raise a Flag is the inaugural exhibition at Onsite Gallery. Onsite is OCAD's professional public gallery at 199 Richmond Street in Toronto, Ontario. This recording is intended as an educational tool to supplement the educational guide that is available free of charge on our website. You can find it at www.ocad.ca/gallery/onsite. Click on Past Exhibitions, click on Raise a Flag, and scroll down. This recording will follow the educational guide as written by Farah Yusuf. My name is Amanda, and I will be the voice of this audio guide. I am a monitor at the gallery and a student at OCAD. I acknowledge that I am a Canadian settler and have thus approached this project with sensitivity. Myself and the team at Onsite would like to note that pronouncing artists' names, nations, locations, and keywords in their native languages was of importance to us when considering the creation of this audio guide. Although we have striven to educate ourselves on the pronunciations of these words, my first languages are French and English. Consequently, we preemptively apologize for any mispronunciations. Let's begin. About the exhibition. Raise a Flag is an exhibition drawn from the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada Indigenous Art Collection, a comprehensive national heritage collection representing First Nations, Inuit, and Métis art. Since the 1960s, Indigenous artists, curators, and arts administrators have actively gathered and managed the wide range of artwork by emerging, mid-career, and established Indigenous artists that comprise this important, largely unnoticed, public collection. In the age of reconciliation and Confederation acknowledgement, Raise a Flag repurposes and activates the invaluable collection, introducing these artworks to the public with an invitation to reflect and contemplate upon issues framed through artistic perspectives and nuances of indigeneity. With a focus on acquisitions made from 2000 to 2015, Raise a Flag celebrates the work of 33 artists who present diverse points of Indigenous worldviews, which authenticate the fluid nature of Indigenous visual culture and taunt the viewer to take notice and consider a unique rereading of Canadian history. Raise a Flag chronicles significant narratives through a questioning lens and a wider national and global consciousness interpreted through a wide variety of aesthetic forms and media. Together, these works shed light upon parallel sociopolitical discourses and assigns context to marginal histories within a framework of contemporary art that critically addresses collective living histories and offer true national identities. Curated by Ryan Rice, Delaney Chair in Indigenous Visual Culture at OCAD University. Ryan Rice, Kanyankehaka of Kanyake, Quebec, is the Delaney Chair in Indigenous Visual Culture at the OCAD University. His curatorial career spans over 20 years in museums and galleries. Rice served as the chief curator at the IAIA Museum of Contemporary Native Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and also held curatorial positions at the Aboriginal Arts Centre in Ottawa, Ontario, named curatorial fellowships with the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria, British Columbia, and the Walter Phillips Gallery, Banff, Alberta, and Aboriginal Curator-in-Residence at the Carleton University Art Gallery. He received a Master of Arts degree in Curatorial Studies from the Center for Curatorial Studies, Bard College, New York, graduated from Concordia University with a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and received an Associate of Fine Arts from the Institute of American Indian Arts, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Rice's writing on contemporary Onkahungwe art has been published in numerous periodicals and exhibition catalogs, and he has lectured widely. Some of his exhibitions include Anthem, Perspectives on Home and Native Land, Flying Still, Carl Beam, 1943 to 2005, Oso Iroquois, Scouts Honor, Lore, Hochelaga Revisited, Alternation, Soul Sister, Reimagining Kateri Tekakwitha, Counting Coup, Stands with a Fist, Contemporary Native Women Artists, and Articulations in Print. Rice was also a co-founder and former director of the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective and currently sits on the Art Gallery of Ontario's Educational Council, Ontario Association of Art Galleries, and the Native American Arts Studies Association Board. The Indigenous Art Centre program at Indigenous Affairs and Northern Development Canada, INAC, manages the federally supported National Indigenous Art Collection, which includes more than 4,000 works by prominent, emerging, and mid-career First Nations, Inuit, and Métis artists. Established in 1965 and recently celebrating a 50th anniversary in 2016, the collection remains the only active cultural program with standing in the federal government. The expanse of the collection represents a distinct national legacy of cultural production and survivance that supports and maintains the tenacity of visual culture upheld by generations of Indigenous artists and curators across the country. The Indigenous Art Collection is one of the most important and comprehensive collections of contemporary Indigenous fine and cultural arts in Canada and beyond. However, the public collection, sanctioned by the Treasury Board of Canada, may be one of Canada's best-kept secrets. The collection represents a sweeping range of Indigenous cultures across Canada and reveals the immense contributions by groundbreaking artists such as Alan Sapp, Robert Davidson, Joanne Cardinal Schubert, Arthur Schilling, Shelley Nero, and Annie Putuguk across the 20th and 21st century Indigenous and Canadian art history. A large representation of work from the collection has been borrowed from significant exhibitions that have traveled to prominent venues nationally and internationally. Key works have supported the retrospective exhibitions of Norval Morisseau, Daphne Ojig, Carl Beam, and Alex Janvier at the National Gallery of Canada. The administration of the centre was significant as well, and included Indigenous artists and curators, such as Tom Hill, Richard W. Hill Sr., David General, Vivian Gray, Barry Ace, July Papazzi, Ryan Rice, Barry Pottle, Leanne Martin, and Linda Grisani, who developed and shaped the collection with great intention, expertise, and cultural responsibility. Onsite Gallery is thrilled to feature artist Jordan Bennett, whose vibrant and inspiring takeaway art multiple is featured on the Raise a Flag exhibition brochure. As a specially commissioned work for Raise a Flag, works from the Indigenous Art Collection, 2000 to 2015, Bennett responded to the concept of raising a flag. As he describes, he wanted this flag to be raised to support and reflect on the current realities facing our Indigenous communities, but especially our waters and land through the exploitation of natural resources. This piece is called Waterways by Jordan Bennett, created in 2016. It is acrylic on wood panel, 30 inches by 40 inches. Jordan Bennett is a Mi'kmaq multidisciplinary visual artist from Stephenville Crossing, Ktaungkuk, Newfoundland. Jordan has shown extensively in Canada and abroad, in venues such as the Museum of Art and Design, New York City, New York, Museum of Contemporary Native Arts, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Project Space Gallery, RMIT, Melbourne, Australia, the Power Plant, Toronto, Ontario, Musée d'Art Contemporain de Montréal, Montreal, Quebec, l'Institut du Monde Arabe, Paris, France, the Vancouver Art Gallery, Vancouver, British Columbia, and most recently was one of the 2 artists to represent Newfoundland and Labrador at the 2015 Venice Biennial at Galleria Sarazzonico, Venice, Italy. Jordan has recently been longlisted for the 2016 and 2015 Sobey Art Award, presented with the Newfoundland and Labrador Arts Council's Artist of the Year, received the Excellence in Visual Arts Newfoundland's Large Year Award, and named as one of the artists in the 2014 Bluin Arts Info Top 30 Under 30 in Canada. Jordan's work explores a combination of observations and influences from historical and popular culture, new media, traditional art forms, political issues, and his own cultural practices through the processes of sculpture, digital media, installation, painting, sound installation, and various other mediums. Jordan recently completed a master's degree from the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, with a particular focus on exploring Mi'kmaq and Beothuk visual culture and histories. To see more work by Jordan Bennett, visit jordanbennett.ca. About this guide. Visitors may use this guide to enrich their experience of the artworks in Raise a Flag. The information provided here will aid in interpreting the meaning of Indigenous art forms in the context of tradition, contemporary art, and today's society. This guide provides contextual information, artists' biographies, suggested activities, and discussion points for selected works in the show. It is a compilation of texts from the artists, the curator, original material, and other sources. The content of this guide is also designated to complement the Ontario Provincial Native Studies and Visual Arts curriculum. We recommend that educators use this package to encourage discussion with their students on the themes addressed in Raise a Flag. Interpreting the artworks. Here are a few questions to ask yourself when visiting the exhibition. Remember, there's more than one way to interpret artworks, which are layered with multiple meanings. Describe the artwork and consider the title. What do you think the artist is trying to convey? Consider the techniques used to create this piece. What might be significant about the use of specific materials, symbols, or colors? What genre of art would you classify this artwork? What is the tone of the piece of art? Tone may be playful, serious, angry, ironic, intimate, nostalgic, etc. How do you think the political, social, cultural, or economic climate of the time influenced the artist's intention? What larger themes does this artwork speak to in society? Consider how the artwork's meaning may shift and evolve in relation to different time periods and contexts. How does it represent our current milieu? Do you like it? Why or why not? Selected works. Here is a quote by Ryan Rice. The collection has been referred to as a bundle. Like a bundle, the Indian Art Collection contains narratives, dreams, magic, medicine, and necessities of life. The objects that testify to artistic and creative achievements bring a sacredness to our bundle. End quote by Ryan Rice. Positioning sovereignty. As Canada celebrates 150 years of Confederacy, Indigenous artists in Canada continue to proactively insert their creative agency to counter and disrupt the accepted narrative. They do this as a means to bring attention to and reconcile the devastating and perpetual effects of colonialism. The lasting effect of oppression continues to stir individual and collective insistence for justice and recognized presence in our home and native land. Engaging with the artworks. The following discussion prompts will aid in a deeper engagement with the themes and concerns addressed by the artworks in this section. Engage in a discussion about the statement, "Nation building is an ongoing activity." Do you agree or disagree? Explain your reasons why. Students are encouraged to change their position if compelling arguments are made by their peers. Students are encouraged to consider the statement from multiple perspectives, example, Indigenous, immigrant, etc., and government policies that encourage or limit participation and representation in both the idea and practice of nationhood. Is there a unified Canadian identity? Should there be? Consider Rachel Lafon's piece, Chi Chinu, Our Home, and discuss the following questions. What is a reserve? What is a land claim? Do you acknowledge the territory where you live? If so, what nations are addressed? Research and discuss the overlapping meanings of the terms sovereignty, self-determination, and self-government. Divide the class into groups to research and present the flags, symbols, crests, and visuals representing each of Canada's distinct First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. This piece is called Chi Chinu Our Home, made in 2012 by Cree artist Rachel Lafont. It is thread and canvas and is 28 by 33 centimeters. A quote by Rachel Lafont. Being an artist, for me, means sharing knowledge and ideas. It's a virtual language. Some images are clear and straightforward in meaning. Other works are for the individual to create understanding with their own perception. End quote by Rachel Lafont. Born to a James Bay Cree mother and to a French-Canadian father, Rachel Lafont was raised by her late mother in the northern reservation called Chisasibi, Quebec. She graduated from Concordia University, where she obtained a brevet in teaching and a BA in fine arts. Recognizing the need for more First Nations self-representation in an urban area like Montréal, Lafont's artwork addresses historical, political, and cultural matters so that people may gain more of an understanding of Native issues. She currently works in the cultural center of her hometown, surrounded by tons of history, a thriving culture, and the need to preserve Cree language. The following paragraph has been written by Ryan Rice. Artist Rachel Lafont from the Cree Nation of Iuishti renders Canada in Chi Chinu Our Home as an embroidered map evoking traditional crafting aesthetics to document the country's architecture. Lafont stitches the outline of Canada as a foundation divided by the provinces to illustrate a national floor plan for a typical single-family detached dwelling. Such mass settlement patterns demarcating the land as plentiful and free focus on the real estate built over native land. The map is void of any trace of traditional demarcated territories or the tiny plots of reserve land set aside under the Indian Act and treaties in the name of the Crown. Lafont offers a map key to shed light upon the dispossession of homeland and infrastructure crisis consequent of a federally failed reserve system. This next piece is called In the Past, the RCMP Killed the Dogs. It was created in 2005 by Inuit artist Jimmy Iqaluit. It is mixed media on Argillite. The gun is 8.5 by 1.5 centimeters, and overall the sculpture is 11 by 21 by 9 centimeters. Jimmy Iqaluit was born in Katapik near Sanikiluit in 1947. He has been carving since he was 13 years old. He learned to carve by watching his parents, Mina and Samueli. His carvings are inspired by his experience and knowledge as a hunter. His work is included in many important collections. Besides making art, Jimmy enjoys providing country food for his family and friends. Jimmy Iqaluit's sculpture, In the Past the RCMP Killed the Dogs, speaks of an issue that has left deep wounds across Canada's Arctic. Between the 1950s to 1970s, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police intentionally killed thousands of Inuit sled dogs. The Inuit insist the slaughter was part of a campaign to force them off the land and into federal programs and villages, while the RCMP claimed that the killings were for public health purposes and to control disease. Not only did the practice disrupt the Inuit way of life and their mobility for hunting, the decades-long dispute caused further distrust and segregation between the two cultures. In 2005, the RCMP conducted an internal investigation into the matter, which exonerated their actions. Believing the RCMP's report to be biased, incomplete, and flawed, the Kikiktini Truth Commission was set up in 2007 to gather testimony, request a formal acknowledgement by the Government of Canada, and propose steps towards compensation and healing. Truth commissions are bodies that investigate patterns of abuse over a period of time. They are not criminal trials and don't have powers of prosecution. The purpose is to provide a safe place for victims to tell their stories and to have their experiences become part of the official record. This next piece is called Two Métis Flags Quilt. It was created in 2012 by Métis artist David Garneau. It is an oil painting on canvas and is 122 by 122 centimeters. David Garneau is an associate professor of visual arts at the University of Saskatchewan. Garneau's practice includes painting, drawing, performance art, video, curation, and critical writing. He's interested in visual and tactile expressions of contemporary Indigenous identities, especially innovations in Métis art, and moments of productive friction between nature and culture, materialism, and metaphysics. The following paragraph has been written by the artist. Two Métis flags, Quilt, belongs to a series of quilt paintings I made between 2011 and 2015. I am interested in homey material culture, especially handmade things, popular with Métis people, as well as their First Nations and non-Indigenous neighbors. Quilts are complex and labor-intensive. They often include shared labor and are made from cast-off things. Quilts are repositories for memories as well as bodies. They allow many different aspects to live together. Even opposites are housed in quilts. This painting features two aspects of historical Métis identity. While the flag goes back more than 200 years, it came to prominence with the Battle of Seven Oaks in 1816. It is the most recognizable of the Métis symbols. The blue flag is associated with the Northwest Company, French Allied, and the red with the Hudson's Bay, Anglo-Allied. The white infinity symbol signifies perpetual harmony and the joining of European and First Nations origins of the Métis Nation. I wanted to make a quilt painting that recognized the two European origins of the Métis. The quilt, like the flag, wants to show Métis are in relation, if not always, in harmony. The motion is dynamic. The fluttering flags are in conversation. End paragraph, written by David Garneau. To see more work by David Garneau, please visit davidgarneau.com. This piece is called Flags. It was created in 2004 by Mohawk artist Greg A. Hill. It's a digital print and overall is 59 by 45 centimeters. Greg A. Hill is a Kinyen-Kihaka Mohawk, member of the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, and the O'Dane Senior Curator and head of the Department of Indigenous Art at the National Gallery of Canada. As a multidisciplinary artist, he has been exhibiting his artwork since 1989 with over 50 exhibitions and performance works in North America and Europe. His work explores aspects of colonialism, nationalism, and concepts of space and community through the lens of his Mohawk and French identity. Greg A. Hill redesigns the Canadian flag to position Indigenous sovereignty. The maple leaf is replaced with 3 feathers representing the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people of Canada, while the red bands symbolize their enduring presence from coast to coast. This work was part of a larger performance and installation project called Canada, where symbols of national identity, flags, passports, and souvenirs, were transformed to reflect an Indigenous perspective. By invoking Kanata, the Mohawk origin of the word Canada, meaning town or village, Hill gestures at a future that acknowledges the past as a challenge to the present political movement. The second theme in Raise a Flag is connections to the land. Despite the loss of traditional territories to colonial settlement across Canada, Indigenous people maintain a connection to the land and waters through ceremony, storytelling, custodial responsibility, and political activism. These practices inform a living cultural knowledge of the ecology and spiritual connectedness to the country. Engaging with the artworks. The following activities will aid in a deeper engagement with the themes and concerns addressed by the artworks in this section. Experiment with different materials harvested from the land. This can include making your own dyes from pigments found in food or plants, making your own paper, or creating a sculpture from objects found in nature. Keep a diary to document the plants found in your garden or home. Draw them at various stages of growth. Are any of the plants used for food? Do they have medicinal properties? If you don't have any plants at home, walk through a natural area to identify and document plants that you encounter. Do they have a significance to Indigenous peoples from the area? Research current issues and pipeline resistance movements such as DAPL, Dakota Access Pipeline, and Water is Life. How many places in Canada do not have clean running water? Make a protest banner about an environmental issue that you care about. It can be graphic, text-based, or both. Explain your design choices in relation to the messages you are trying to convey. Write a story about a site of significance to yourself or your family. Is it in Canada or elsewhere? Draw an aerial view from memory of your neighborhood, city, or province. Illustrate or annotate the map with events and stories that are significant to you, your family, or your community. This next piece is called Parallel Roads. It was created in 2014 by Barry Ace, an Anishinaabe Ottawa artist. It is mixed media on paper and is 76 by 56 centimeters. Barry Ace is a practicing visual artist who currently lives in Ottawa, Canada. He is a band member of M'Shijing First Nation, Manitoulin Island, in Ontario, Canada. His mixed media paintings and assemblage textile works explore various aspects of cultural continuity and the confluence of the historical and contemporary. The following paragraph has been written by the artist. This work is based on the two different perspectives of relationship to land between settler and Indigenous peoples. The two beaded strips represent the visual magnetic code of wampum belts of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence peoples, in particular the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. These belts denoted the Indigenous perspective of the relationship with the settlers. The line of freight cars traversing the landscape mirror the beaded wampum belts and metaphorically reflect the settler perspective of land and material ownership, where each freight car represents a settler bed that is filled with personal wealth and commodity, while the railway line that traversed the land represents the dispossession and forced removal of Indigenous people from the land. The single porcupine quilt and swatch of indigo blue paint directly above the landscape represents the signed treaties and the settlers' perspective of the divine authority through Christianity and crown that was used to overwrite Indigenous perspectives and stake claim to traditional Indigenous territories. End paragraph by Barry Ace. To see more work by Barry Ace, please visit barryacearts.com. This piece is by Anishinaabe artist Lisa Myers. It's called Blueprint Water, Blueprint Land, Blueprint Train Tracks, Blueprint. Created in 2012, it is a serigraph on paper. Each print is 55.9 by 76.2 centimeters. The following is a quote by the artist. This series comes from an ongoing body of work where I use blueberries as a material in mark making and as ink in screen printing. I've titled these works under the term blueprints, as in the stories told to us by our families, and the things we witness are the blueprints for our lives, and they inform how we locate ourselves and retain a sense of belonging. End quote by Lisa Myers. In addition to being an artist, Lisa Myers is an independent curator, musician, and chef. These disciplines inform her various practices. Lisa's mother's family is Anishinaabe and French from the Shawanaga. Lisa's mother's family is Anishinaabe and French from Shawanaga and Beausoleil First Nation in the Georgian Bay region, and her dad is from English and Austrian ancestry who settled in southern Ontario. In 2011, Myers earned her Master of Fine Arts in Criticism and Curatorial Practice from OCAD University, which focused on the use of food in Indigenous art practice. Rendered in blueberry ink, Lisa Myers' Blueprint series depicts the Canadian Pacific Railway tracks and surrounding land and waterways at a site between Sault Ste. Marie and Sudbury, Ontario, where the Mississauga River empties into Lake Huron. In the early 1900s, before a road was completed between the two cities, train travel was the main means of transporting children to residential school. The artist's grandfather ran away from residential school, following the tracks along the north shore of Lake Huron and surviving on blueberries. The area mapped in Meyer's prints is where her grandfather first heard his language after leaving school and saw Anishinaabe people cooking food down by the river. It is a site of importance in her familial history that she has connected with and honored by creating these works and walking this distance with members of her family in the summer of 2009. By memorializing her grandfather's journey, Myers redresses omissions in the historical record. For more works by Lisa Myers, please visit lisarosemyers.com. The following piece was created by Elisapie Ishlutak, Inuit artist. It's called Bridge in Pangnirtung. It was created in 2010 and is stencil on paper. Framed, it's 77.5 by 56 centimeters. Overall, it is 60 by 43 centimeters. Elisapie Ishlutak is a noted carver and artist whose work is found in major national and international collections. Born in 1925 at Kagik-Tukjuak, Baffin Island, she experienced the traditional Inuit lifestyle until 1970, when she moved to Pangnirtung, Baffin Island. Ishlutak was among the first Pangnirtung artists to make prints, and over the decades became known for her drawings recalling the old way of life. In 2014, Elisapie Ishlutak was appointed to the Order of Canada. Elisapie Ishlutak's birthplace, Kagik-Tukjuak, is one of several small seasonal camps situated near Pangnirtung on Baffin Island. When Ishlutak took permanent residence in Pangnirtung at the age of 45, she became involved in the community's new art-making program. Like many Inuit artists of her generation, Ishlutak often depicted the traditional Inuit way of life that she knew before the transition to permanent settlement. Her works are largely domestic snapshots of Inuit experience. Bridge in Pangnirtung makes reference to a major local event when, in 2008, the eponymous bridge was destroyed by a flash flood that tore massive pieces of permafrost out of the tundra and carried them to sea. The bridge's destruction highlights the challenges of engineering projects in the far north with respect to global warming. For more work by Elisapie Ishlutak, please visit gallery.ca/collection/artist/Elisapie-Ishlutak. This series is by Assiniboine artist Tania Harnett. It's called Sweet Scared Sacred Water. Created in 2011, they are photographs on paper. Framed, they are each 84.5 by 64 centimeters. Overall, they are 84 by 366 centimeters. The following is a quote by the artist. "Water is the most important issue right now because it's the thing that's being used up the most. It's being used by industry, and it's being contaminated by industry." End quote by Tania Harnett. Tania Harnett is a member of the Carry the Kettle First Nations in Saskatchewan. She is an artist and professor at the University of Alberta and a joint appointment in the Department of Art and Design and the Faculty of Native Studies. Working in various media, including photography, drawing, printmaking, and fiber, Harnett's studio practice engages in the notions and politics of identity, history, spirituality, and place. Tania Harnett's Sweet Scared Sacred Water brings attention to contaminated bodies of water on Albertan reservations. In 2011, Harnett traveled to 5 First Nation reserves: Paul First Nation, Alexis First Nation, Driftpile First Nation, Cold Lake First Nation, and Lubicon First Nation, where she located a body of water believed to be contaminated. By pouring red food coloring into the affected water source and photographing the result, Harnett makes visible what is unseen or minimized. Her Scared Sacred Water series is an attempt to make Albertans outside of the reservations aware of the damage done to the natural environment by industry and oil spills. This piece was created by Michif Otapimisiwak artist Christy Belcourt. It's called So Much Depends Upon Who Holds the Shovel. Created in 2008, it is acrylic on canvas. Framed, it's 125 by 248 centimeters. Overall is 121.9 by 243.8 centimeters. Christy Belcourt is a Métis visual artist whose work celebrates the beauty of the natural world while expressing concern for the environment, biodiversity, spirituality, and awareness of Métis culture. She's the lead coordinator and a contributing artist for Walking with Our Sisters, a commemorative art installation for the missing and murdered Indigenous women of Canada, and the author of books on traditional medicine and beadwork. Beading is so essential to the Métis that they became known as the flower beadwork people. Christy Belcourt draws on her Métis heritage to bring new life to the art form of beading, using thousands of raised dots of acrylic paint to simulate a beadwork effect. So Much Depends on Who Holds the Shovel speaks to the artist's deep respect for the traditions and knowledge of her people, as well as her ecological concerns for plant species facing extinction, many of which are used in traditional medicine. The plants depicted in this painting include the arrowhead water plant, yellow pond lily, strawberry, skunk cabbage, purple bee balm, chokecherry, wild grapes, and oak leaves. The bird is the Kirkland's warbler, an endangered species. For more work by Christy Belcourt, please visit christybelcourt.com. The following theme in the exhibition is identity. Through much of Canadian history, quote-unquote Indians were to be imagined out of existence and erased from society through assimilation policies supported by legislation and religion. These violent tactics severed relationships of being to language, customary tradition, artistic expression, community, and identity. Indigenous artists are re-examining these histories of racial and cultural intolerance through contemporary nuances of identity, hybridity, stereotypes, and misrepresentation. Engaging with the artworks. While there are many differences between First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, these names refer to the three main groups of peoples who are the traditional inhabitants of this land. Review the following terminology and legislation to provide a context for the artwork in this section. Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous means native to the area. It is a self-declared term, rather than government-imposed, such as Indian, for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. The term has been growing in popularity in Canada and globally since the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was adopted by the General Assembly to guide member state nation policies on the collective rights of Indigenous people. First Nations. First Nation is a term used to identify Indigenous peoples of Canada who are neither Métis nor Inuit. The term came into common usage in the 1970s to replace the terms Indian and Indian Band, which many find offensive. First Nations people include both status and non-status Indians. There are more than 600 First Nations in Canada and over 60 languages reported by First Nations people, an indication of the diversity of First Nations people across the country. Inuit. Inuit are Indigenous people in northern Canada, united by a common culture and language and living mainly in Nunavut, Northwest Territories, northern Quebec, and Labrador. The word Inuit means the people in Inuktitut and is the term by which Inuit refer to themselves. The Indian Act does not cover Inuit. However, in 1939, the Supreme Court of Canada interpreted the federal government's power to make laws affecting, quote, Indians and lands reserved for the Indians, end quote, as extending to Inuit. Métis. The word Métis is French for mixed blood. Historically, the term Métis applied to the children of French fur traders and Cree women in the prairies, of English and Scotland traders and Dene women in the north, and of British and Inuit in Newfoundland and Labrador. Today, the term is used broadly to describe people with mixed First Nations and European ancestry. The Métis National Council adopted the following definition of Métis in 2012. Quote, Métis means a person who self-identifies as Métis, is distinct from other Aboriginal peoples, is of historic Métis national ancestry, and who is accepted by the Métis Nation. End quote. The Constitution Act of 1982 recognizes Métis as one of the 3 Indigenous peoples of Canada, and they are now covered by the Indian Act. Indian. Indian is the legal term for an Indigenous person who was registered under the Indian Act. It should only be used in legal constitutional matters requiring precise terminology, or in matters related to the governance of the Indian Act. Whenever it is necessary to use this term, it should be placed in quotations to indicate the fraught nature of the word. Status Indian. Status Indians are people who are entitled to have their names included on the Indian Register, an official list administered by Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada, INAC. Certain criteria determine who can be registered as a Status Indian, and only Status Indians are recognized as, quote, Indians under the Indian Act and are entitled to certain rights and benefits under the law. Non-Status Indian. Non-Status Indians are people who consider themselves, quote, Indians or members of a First Nation, but whom the Government of Canada does not recognize as, quote, Indians under the Indian Act, either because they are unable to prove their status or have lost their status rights. Non-Status Indians are not entitled to the same rights and benefits available to Status Indians. The 1876 Indian Act attempted to consolidate all existing legislation that covered First Nations and their relationship to Canada. The Act is very wide-ranging in scope, covering band governance, reserves, land use, healthcare, education, and defines who is recognized as, quote, Indian. The Indian Act essentially made Status Indians ward of the Crown and regulated their lives and land use. The theme throughout the Indian Act is that of civilizing, where Indian status was regarded as a temporary stage on the road to assimilation. The Indian Act denied women's status, introduced residential schools, created reservations, renamed individuals with European names, restricted First Nations from leaving reserves without permission from an Indian agent, enforced enfranchisement of any First Nation admitted to university, could expropriate portions of reserves for roads, railways, and other public works, as well as to move an entire reserve away from a municipality if it was deemed expedient, could lease out uncultivated reserve lands to non-First Nations if the new leaseholder would use it for farming or pasture, forbade First Nations from forming political organizations, denied First Nations the right to vote, forbade First Nations from speaking their native language, forbade First Nations from practicing their traditional religion, forbade Western First Nations from appearing in any public dance, show, exhibition, stampede, or pageant wearing traditional regalia, and declared potlatch and other cultural ceremonies illegal. There were various federal policies over the years that caused Status Indians to be removed from the Indian Registry. Some lost status when they earned a university degree, joined the army or the priesthood, gained title of land, or married a non-Indian. Discussion prompts. Discuss the term culture. Is it static or continuously evolving? Why or why not? What outside forces influence culture? Are these beneficial or detrimental? Consider disruptions to cultural continuity. Discuss the implications of losing access to song, art, and language. What would the impact be on one's sense of identity? Why is reclamation and revitalization so important? Discuss gender equity in relation to the Indian Act and Bill C-31, which was passed in 1985 as an amendment to the Act. Discuss recent current events related to cultural appropriation. For example, the Cultural Appropriation Prize in Canadian media, urban outfitters using Navajo symbols, Plains sacred headdresses appropriated at Coachella, etc. Who has access to cultural material? Consider significance of symbols, art, music, and stories to a people who were once denied their culture. Consider the term authenticity. Consider who gains, financially or otherwise, from cultural material. This piece is by Inuit artist Barry Pottle. It's called Awareness 1 and 2, created in 2009 and 2010. They are digital photographs on paper. Framed, they are each 74.3 by 74.2 centimeters. Overall, they are 74.3 by 148.4 centimeters. Unframed, they are each 63.5 by 61 centimeters. Barry Pottle is an Inuk artist from Nunatsiavut in Labrador, Rigole, who now resides in Ottawa, Ontario. He is an emerging photographer who documents and works closely with and for the Ontario Indigenous arts community. Pottle has said of his artistic practice that it documents and explores contemporary issues and realities facing urban Inuit populations, highlighting Inuit culture, identity, tradition, and lifeways. In the Awareness series, photographer Barry Pottle confronts the Eskimo identification tag system implemented by the Canadian government. Between 1944 and 1969, every Inuk in the Western and Eastern Arctic was required to carry on their person a small disc with an identification number signifying their region, community, and a unique numerical identifier. The practice was born out of cultural insensitivity and bureaucratic laziness in response to the complexities of Inuit naming traditions. Federal agents deemed Inuit names to be too long, difficult to spell, and frustrating to pronounce. Despite this dehumanizing practice, Pottle's object study reveals simple gestures of personalization like writing a name, in English or Inuktitut, alongside the number. These pieces are called Meditations on Red 5 and Meditations on Red 2, created in 2013 by Algonquin artist Nadia Mayer. They are digital prints on plexiglass and are 121.9 centimeters in diameter. Born in Montreal, Nadia Mayer is a First Nations artist who employs collaborative processes as a strategy for engaging in conversation about identity, resilience, and politics of belonging. Nadia Mayer's multidisciplinary practice has been inspired by participant involvement as well as recurring themes of longing and loss, identity, and language. Nadia Mayer's Meditation on Red series investigates Native identity and official status through blood composition. Using the language of science, her beaded portraits reflect varying degrees of racial purity or hybridity between red and white. The series highlights the ongoing debate of who can claim Native identity in the eyes of federal law, particularly Indigenous women who, until the passing of Bill C-31 in 1985, would lose their status if they married a non-Native. For more work by Nadia Mayer, please visit nadiamayer.net. This next piece was created by Lakota Sioux artist Dana Claxton. It is called Tatanka Wanbli Chekpa Wisinkla. Created in 2006, it is seat print on archival board. Framed, they are each 79 by 104 centimeters. Overall, they are 79 by 520 centimeters. Unframed, they are each 76.2 by 101.5 centimeters. Dana Claxton, a member of the Lakota Nation, is a curator, artist, and assistant professor in the University of British Columbia Department of Art History, Visual Art, and Theory. Claxton works in film, photography, single and multi-channel video installation, and performance art. Her practice investigates beauty, the body, the sociopolitical, and the spiritual. She has received numerous awards, including the Jack and Doris Shadbolt Foundation Viva Award for the Visual Arts and the Idle Jorg Fellowship. Dana Claxton's Tatanka Wanbli Chekpa Wisinkla deals with Western perception of Indigenous culture and the commodification of cultural symbols. The photographic series consists of 5 images where the 2 outermost photos are close-up views of a buffalo hide and an eagle feather. Between these, twin sisters each hold a stuffed toy version of these animals, contrasting the real and the manufactured. The buffalo and eagle are symbols of power and trust in Lakota culture. However, their presentation as children's toys drains them of their symbolic meaning. For more work by Dana Claxton, please visit danaclaxton.com. These next pieces are by Lakewold artist Sonia Su. They are called Illegal Song and Illegal Dance. Created in 2010, they are acrylic on hide and 50.8 centimeters in diameter. The following is a quote by the artist. "The potlatch ban was a law that affected everyone from my great-great-grandparents to my grandparents. 3 generations of my family forbidden to practice their culture." End quote by Sonia Su. Sonia Su is a Likwilda Kwakwakwa contemporary artist. Through paintings, sculptures, prints, and installations, Asu merges the aesthetics of his nation's iconography with a pop art sensibility to address Indigenous issues and rights. His work often deals with the loss of language, cultural resources, and the effects of colonization. Asu received the British Columbia Creative Achievement Award in First Nations Art in 2011, and was longlisted for the Sobey Art Award in 2012, 2013, and 2015. Illegal Song and Illegal Dance are 2 elk hide drums painted with the abstract Northwest Coast symbols. The titles make reference to the Indian Act, which in 1885 was revised to ban Indigenous cultural activities such as the potlatch. The potlatch was the core of Kwakwakwa cultural practice, where singing, dancing, and traditional ceremonies took place. The ban was one of the government's most oppressive legislative efforts to eliminate the customs, languages, and beliefs of Indigenous peoples. To see more work by Sonia Su, please visit soniasu.com. This following piece was created by Secwepemc artist Tania Willard. It is called Be a Good Girl and was created in 2008. It is a hand-colored woodcut. Framed is 81 by 96 by 3 centimeters. Overall is 66.5 by 87 centimeters. Tania Willard, Secwepemc Nation, works within the shifting ideas of contemporary and traditional as it relates to cultural arts and production, often working with bodies of knowledge and skills that are conceptually linked to her interest in intersections between Aboriginal and other cultures. Willard has worked as a curator in residence with Grunt Gallery and Kamloops Art Gallery. Willard's curatorial work includes Beat Nation, Art Hip-Hop and Aboriginal Culture, a national touring exhibition first presented at Vancouver Art Gallery in 2011. The following was written by Tania Willard. Be a Good Girl is a reflection of the gendered work expectations and training of women in the 1950s. I have explored this topic by looking at Indian residential schools and the ways in which young Native women were trained in an effort to transform them into good, working-class wives and workers. The Indian residential school system had a half-day labor program for girls, which was abolished in 1952 out of concern that children were not receiving an education but were only serving the financial needs of the school. Residential schools forbade Native children from speaking their languages or practicing their culture in an attempt to mold them for their, quote, salvation into productive members of white capitalist society. The residential schools were part of a dark history of racism and genocide in Canada and continue to have negative effects. This sort of gendered work training, however, was not reserved for the assimilation of Natives. Training schools like the Ontario Training School for Girls rehabilitated young women with, quote, loose morals and other traits that were not tolerated in the 50s. Both white working class and Native girls attended these training schools. This piece is about conflicts, spiritual paradoxes, and societal expectations of young women in the 50s. End quote by Tania Willard. For more work by this artist, please visit taniawillard.ca. The following thematic in the exhibition is Breaking Barriers and Legacies. The following quote is by Ryan Rice. Artists have freedom to experiment with genres and styles that issue both from our traditions, from our collective experiences, as well as from Western art forms. Artists grasp, without cultural shame, all of the tools and techniques available to them. End quote by Ryan Rice. The 33 artists in Raise a Flag are part of a creative legacy of Indigenous artwork created and collected against all odds. A legacy that endures well into the age of reconciliation and Confederation recognition. The notable artists and art forms featured in this section survived and flourished despite residue of cultural prejudice and erasure sanctioned by Canada's Indian Act policy. They exemplify a continuation of artistic tradition that prioritizes nuances of indigeneity while incorporating the influence of Western art practices. Engaging with the artworks. The following research suggestions will aid in situating the notable Indigenous artists featured in this section amongst their peers. Consider Carl Beam's Sweet Prince. Research notable Indigenous figures and silkscreen their portraits. Do the figures you've chosen have a particular theme? For example, water, protectors, revolutionaries, etc.? What challenges did they overcome? Research a notable Indigenous artist from each of Canada's regions. What contributions have they made? Are their works in any major collections? Research an emerging Indigenous artist and write a proposal or rationale nominating one of their artworks for inclusion in a major collection. Consider the collection's mission and mandate, as well as how your nomination complements other works in the collection. Beadwork. Barry Ace, Christy Belcourt, Ruth Cuthland. Rachel Lafont and Nadia Mayer are at the forefront of a movement that has reclaimed beadwork as contemporary art. In beaded abstraction, Ace brings his expertise in beading powwow regalia to the surface of a painting. He employs the mirror symmetry found in classical floral beadwork. Executed in appliqué stitch, Ace tacks strings of beads onto a surface with tiny stitches laid between every 2 or 3 beads. In Hepatitis C and HIV, from the Surviving series, Ruth Cutland uses the same technique to paint deadly viruses in exacting detail. Research and experience lie under each beaded surface. HIV was created during a residency at AIDS Saskatchewan, where Cutland organized a feast for the dead with Indigenous clients. Rachel Lafont recreates an iconic 1939 photograph on the unforgiving grid of a beading loom. The stark economy of shape and color used in Ma'an Nukum, There's My Grandmother, emphasizes the hierarchy in residential schools. Nadia Mayer's Meditation on Red 2 and 5 are large photographs of circular beaded forms created off the needle, a single needle and thread weaving beads to create shapes. Translating beadwork to large photographs and paintings, both Mayer and Christy Belcourt use scale to a great effect, forcing viewers to take beads seriously. Belcourt's "So Much Depends Upon Who Holds the Shovel" replace rhythmic stitches with the repetitive gesture of individually applied dots of paint. Each artist uses beadwork's durational process to tether meaning with every stitch. This section on beadwork was written by Sherry Farrell Racette. Of Métis heritage, Sherry Farrell Racette is a member of the Timiskaming First Nation, Quebec. Her research interests include First Nations and Métis women's history, art history, museum collections, First Nations and Métis traditional arts, issues of self-representation, and Indigenous knowledge and pedagogy. The following pieces are by Deniseline Soto artist Alex Janvier. The first is called 4 Spots, created in 2011. It's acrylic on linen and 61 centimeters in diameter. The next is called Life's Oasis, created in 2013. It's watercolor on paper and 54 centimeters in diameter. 4 Spots is symbolic of the sacredness of the number 4 to North American Indigenous culture. 4 directions, 4 seasons, 4 life stages, 4 areas of health, 4 elements, and the 4 worlds of spirit, people, animals, and nature. The following was written by Ryan Rice. Celebrated Deniseline and Soto artist Alex Janvier from Cold Lake First Nations, Alberta, has made an incredible contribution to the arts in the field, locating Indigenous and Canadian arts simultaneously. Janvier has come into his own with his unique pictorial modernist style, a synthesis of his exposure to European schools of abstract drawing and painting, Kandinsky, Klee, and Miro, and traditional narrative forms of Indigenous object and image-making practices. He is a national treasure who has received significant accolades throughout his career, including the Governor-General Award in Visual and Media Arts, National Aboriginal Lifetime Achievement, and membership to the Order of Canada and the Royal Canadian Academy for the Arts. In addition, he holds honorary doctorate degrees from the University of Alberta, the University of Calgary, and OCAD University. Alex Janvier was active in facilitating positive change for Indigenous peoples through his unremitting involvement in the arts and politics. In the 1960s and into the 1970s, Alex was a member of an important art alliance named the Professional Native Indian Artists, Inc., PINAI, who made history by demanding recognition for Indigenous artists within the mainstream art world. The groundbreaking work of the Indian Group of Seven alliance with Daphne Ojeg, Nerval Morisseau, Joseph Sanchez, Jackson Beardy, Carl Ray, and Eddie Kobinas continues to be honored today for the significant change and recognition they created for Indigenous art and artists. He taught art through the University of Alberta Extension Program and was an advisor in the development of cultural policy with the Department of Indian and Northern Affairs. A catalyst for change, Janvier's career acknowledges a call upon persistent recognition for the visual sovereignty he maintained through cultural and political inspiration and expression. His work has been exhibited widely in solo and group exhibitions across Canada and internationally. End quote by Ryan Rice, which was written for the OCAD University Convocation of 2016. Unlike many Indigenous artists of his time, Alex Janvier was able to receive formal art training. After experiencing and surviving the Blue Quills Indian Residential School in St. Paul, Alberta, from the age of 8 through his teens, Janvier applied to school at the Ontario College of Art and was accepted. Due to circumstances beyond his control, Canadian legislature, and actions of oppression, Janvier did not receive permission from the government-appointed Indian agent to leave his reserve and attend OCA as he desired. That did not stop him from becoming one of Canada's most renowned artists after graduating with honors from the Alberta College of Art in 1960. In 2016, Alex Janvier received the distinguished recognition of an honorary doctorate from OCAD University. For more work by Alex Janvier, please visit alexjanvier.com. This next piece was created by Kanawha artist Faye Heavyshield. It's called Slivers, created in 2010. It's a mixed media installation standing at 107 by 274 centimeters. Faye Heavyshield, a member of the Kainai First Nation and fluent Blackfoot speaker, lives and works on the Blood Reserve in the southern Alberta foothills where she was born and raised. Since the mid-1980s, her work has been exhibited throughout Canada and the US and is held in public and private collections throughout North America. Her multidisciplinary artwork, which sometimes includes literal or metaphorical references to blood, is driven and inspired by her personal memories, her family, and her community. The artist acknowledges the many influences and blessings of language, land, community, and family. The following paragraphs were written by Leanne Martin. Faye Heavyshield's works speak to a multisensory, multidisciplinary art practice. It is about stories, listening, and hearing. It is about aesthetics, the physical and conceptual processes of building up and scaling back. Born and raised in southern Alberta, Heavyshield's childhood homes were near rivers, the Old Man River and the Belly River. Since 2004, she has involved herself in site-specific art projects that address the natural, cultural, and historical contexts of rivers throughout Canada. In Slivers 2010, Faye Heavyshield celebrates the intrinsic value of rivers as agents of well-being and respect. She traveled throughout the country photographing surface waters of multiple rivers, the Old Man River, the Red and Assiniboine Rivers, the Fraser River, and the Ottawa River, among others. The curtain of water for Slivers is created from hundreds of these tiny digital images, individually and methodically folded to resemble arrowheads. The work's lightness and mobility creates a gentle rippling effect that evokes both the strength and fragility of rivers. Heavyshield's practice involves seemingly laborious, repetitious actions that produce thoughtful and elegant architectural installations. The multiple elements reflect the meditative process of her art making that often leads to exploration and creation beyond the original concepts. Heavyshield's deceptively spare sculptures carry with them the power of understatement and engagement. She addresses the complexities of her imagination and the diverse concepts and processes that are important to her. Fluid and timeless, Heavyshield's works reward close attention with layers of meaning, both familiar and mysterious. End quote by Leanne Martin. Leanne Martin is an independent curator and writer living in Ottawa. She is the former curator of contemporary Canadian Aboriginal art at the Canadian Museum of Civilization in Gatineau and former head curator of the Mackenzie Art Gallery in Regina. Martin has curated, written, and lectured extensively on contemporary Indigenous art, both nationally and internationally, over the past 30 years. The following work is by Anishinaabe artist Carl Beam. It is a series of serigraph on paper. Framed, they are 92 by 73.5 centimeters. Overall, they are 76.3 by 56 centimeters. The following is a quote by the artist. "If things that affect me as a microcosm affect others, then I, as an artist in society, must give away my vision of the order of things. To do this, I must be the master of not only visual phenomena, but also of the effect they exert on the mind, on the conscious and unconscious. Art as resolution, art as exorcism, art as power, art as medicine." End quote by Carl Beam. Carl Beam was born in 1943 in Mshijing First Nation in the Manitoulin District of Ontario. He worked in various photographic media, mixed media, oil, acrylic, text, works on paper, plexiglass, stone, cement, wood, handmade ceramic pottery, and found objects, as well as lithography, etching, and screen printing. In the year 2000, Carl Beam was inducted into the Royal Canadian Academy of the Arts. He was awarded the Governor-General's Award in Visual and Media Arts shortly before his death in 2005. Carl Beam is renowned for working in an aesthetic style more akin to pop art than the traditional forms of Anishinaabeg woodland school. However, Beam's art engages his Anishinaabeg traditions through a juxtaposition of images that explore the space between Indigenous and other cultural views. Beam often used collaged and silk-screened images from popular culture to act as symbolic codes that refer to larger societal issues. These images act as puzzles for the viewer to interpret. Beam's themes include different approaches to knowledge and spirituality, our alienation from the natural world, the consequences of colonialism, and the cult of celebrity. The suite of serigraphs on display in Raise a Flag include such notable figures as Albert Einstein, Celine Dion, Madonna, John Lennon, Elvis Presley, Keith Richards, Barbra Streisand, and Cher. These portraits are devoid of Anishinaabe symbols, nor are there any notable Indigenous figures present. Yet, their absence here is a telling reminder of who occupies the space of the wider cultural consciousness. Carl Beam made Canadian art history as the first Indigenous artist to have his work purchased by the National Gallery of Canada as contemporary art. His painting, The North American Iceberg, of 1985, was acquired in 1986, thus breaking the barrier for Indigenous art's acceptance into the Canadian art canon and opening the door for a new generation of Indigenous artists to enter. For more work by Carl Beam, please visit carlbeam.com. The following work is by Inuit artist Annie Putuguk. It's called Briefcase. Created in 2005, is a lithograph on paper. Framed, it's 60 by 60 centimeters. Overall, it's 43.5 by 43 centimeters. Annie Putuguk was a third-generation Inuit artist from Cape Dorset who was at the forefront of the new wave of contemporary Inuit artist expression. She is the daughter of graphic artist Napashi Putuguk and printmaker and carver Iigivudluk Putuguk, and is the granddaughter of Pitsulak Ashuna. Winner of the Sobi Art Award in 2006 and included in prestigious international exhibitions such as Documenta in Kassel, Germany, and in collections such as the National Gallery of Canada Annie Putaguk is considered one of the leading contemporary Inuit graphic artists of her generation. Annie began drawing in 1997 under the encouragement of West Baffin Eskimo Cooperative, Ltd. And throughout her career, her chosen medium involved drawing with pen and colored pencils. Putaguk's drawings challenged conventional expectations of Inuit art by depicting raw, straightforward, and honest scenes of domestic life. Putaguk drew public housing, the frozen food aisle at the grocery store, current events on television, Playboy-style eroticism, alcoholism, and spousal abuse. Her images reflect her experience as a contemporary female artist living and working in the changing milieu of Canada's far north. By inviting the viewer into both her public and private worlds, her artwork managed to transcend cultural boundaries and present the details of her everyday life in an engaging way. The following is a quote by Annie Putaguk. "I didn't see any igloos in my life. Only Skidoo, Honda, the house, things inside the house." End quote by Annie Putaguk. Inuit art, printmaking, and impact. The three pieces we'll be looking at in this subsection are as follow. Kwamutujwak, Snowmobile, by Inuit artist Ohotak Mikigak, created in 2006, is a lithograph on paper. Framed is 94 by 74 centimeters. Overall is 76.5 by 56.5 centimeters. The second is called Shopping for Pilot Biscuits, Flour, Salt, and Groceries. Made in 2008 by Inuit artist Mira Kukiot. This is a stone cut and stencil on paper. Framed, it's 74.2 by 103.8 centimeters. And the third is called Lucky Man, created in 2013 by Inuit artist Kwavavo Manumi. It's a stone cut and stencil on paper. Framed is 72 by 53 centimeters. Overall is 62 by 41 centimeters. Historically, Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada has had a long and intricate relationship with the development of contemporary Inuit art. The association evolved out of the federal government's desire to establish viable economic activities for newly resettled Inuit during the 1950s through the promotion of sculpture, drawing, printmaking, ceramics, textiles, and other arts. Experimentation with printmaking in the north began in 1957 in Cape Dorset, Kingate, at the West Baffin Eskimo Cooperative, Ltd. WBEC. This successful initiative led to the establishment of printmaking programs in co-ops and studios in other communities, including Provurnituk, Ulukatuk, Holmland Island, Kwamanituak, Baker Lake, Nunavik, Arctic Quebec, Pangnirtung, Pangnirtung, and Kangiktuapik, Clyde River. Each of these places produced graphic work reflecting their own distinct characteristics and style. WBEC remains the longest continuously running print shop in Canada. Raise a Flag highlights acquisitions from annual print collections from Cape Dorset, Pangnirtung, and Baker Lake from 2005 to 2010. Annual print collections provide the opportunity for studios to showcase a selection of their most exciting and innovative work. As a group, these prints largely reflect significant changes in artistic methods and subject matter. Over the years, additional printmaking techniques, such as stone cut, stencil, lithography, as well as etching and aquatint, have been mastered by Inuit artists and have allowed them more independence in the printmaking process. This most striking distinction amongst the collection of prints is the increasing depiction of contemporary themes and issues. Through these works, artists are confronting stereotypes and emphasizing significant changes to the way of life in the North for a new generation of Inuit artists. This page has been written by Linda Grusani. Linda Grusani is a member of the Kitigan Zibi Anishinaabeg First Nation, born and raised in the Ottawa area. A curator and an art historian, she presently holds the title of Curator in Aboriginal Art at the Canadian Museum of History and was previously the director of the Indigenous Art Centre from 2012 to 2016. Linda is currently working on a PhD in Cultural Studies at Queen's University. Her research focuses on the history of Indigenous art and artistic expression with an emphasis on contemporary materials. These prints depict contemporary life for Inuit living on settlements in the far north. Kwamotujwak, Snowmobile, by Ohotak Mikigak, makes reference to the common usage of snowmobiles, replacing the traditional use of dog and sled teams. Mira Kukiyot's Shopping for Pilot Biscuits, Flour, Salt, Groceries shows how the grocery stores have replaced hunting as a primary source for food essentials. Kovavo Manumi's Lucky Man wryly suggests that money can be a burden to a people who once thrived outside a market economy. The last theme of the exhibition is survivance. In the face of genocide, erasure, and loss, Indigenous cultural expressions continue to exhibit a spirit of endurance and resilience. Described as survivance by Anishinaabe scholar Gerald Visnor, the term is the antonym of victimry and is imbued with more empowerment than mere survival. The ants suffix implies action, such that survivance refers to an active presence in the face of absence. Within the context of colonialism, Indigenous self-expressions, in whatever mediums, are all acts of survivance. Engaging with the artworks in this section. The following prompts will aid in a deeper engagement with the themes and concerns addressed by the artworks in this section. Research and discuss Unsettling Canada 150. Consider the quote by Arthur Manuel on Unsettling Canada 150 posters. Quote, Indigenous peoples and Canadians who believe in human rights need to look at Canada's 150th birthday party as a period to undertake a commitment to decolonize Canada and recognize the right of Indigenous peoples to self-determination. End quote. What does he mean by decolonize? Follow the hashtags UnsettleCanada150, support Indigenous self-determination, resist 150, etc. to gain some background and see what people are saying. Participate in the discussion. How do the artworks in Raise a Flag complicate Canada 150's celebration? Who gets to celebrate and on whose detriment? Consider the title of the exhibition in relation to Canada 150. Why is Raise a Flag not capitalized? What do you think the curator and the artworks are trying to suggest? Encourage wordplay inspired by portmanteaus like survivance and unsettling. Draw a mind map of all the words and ideas suggested by these portmanteaus. Create your own portmanteau, neologism, or hashtag based on an issue you believe in. Consider Jim Logan's This Is Our Time. Research and discuss the Idle No More movement. What are the main goals of Idle No More? Compare it to historical protest movements like the Oka Crisis. Compare it to other grassroots movements like Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ rights, women's issues, civil rights, etc. Consider the role that social media plays in all of these social justice movements. What is an ally? Are you an ally? This piece is called Untitled. It was created in 2008 by Inuit artist Mark Igloliorti. It's oil on canvas and is 91.5 by 396 centimeters. The following is a quote by the artist. Suicide has no form in itself. Its figurelessness is also wrapped in taboo for the sake of hurt loved ones that live in the absence of those gone. End quote by Mark Igloliorti. Mark Igloliorti is an Inuk artist and educator from Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Labrador. His artistic work is primarily painting and drawing, while working as well in sculpture and performance. In the summer of 2008 and 2009, Igloliorti worked with Inuit youth groups delivering painting and drawing workshops, funded in part by the National Aboriginal Youth Suicide Prevention Strategy through the Nunatsiavut Department of Health and Social Development. Igloliorti's painting, untitled, captures the unresolved complex feelings of emotional distress caused by the alarmingly high rate of suicides among Innu, Inuit, and Métis people of Labrador. Through a repetition of images, Igloliorti uses a cinematic device to stretch a singular moment of time into the past, present, and future. He creates a space for the viewer to look deeper into recurrent patterns and statistics of suicide, to consider the immediacy and irreversibility of death, the persistence of memory, and lived experience of communal grief. For more work by this artist, please visit markigloliorti.net. This piece is called Fringe, created in 2013 by Anishinaabe artist Rebecca Belmore. It's a digital print and is 60 by 183 centimeters. The following has been written by Wanda Nanabush. Born in Uppsala, Ontario, Rebecca Belmore is an artist currently living in Montreal, Quebec. She is internationally recognized for her performance and installation art. Since 1987, her multidisciplinary work has addressed history, place, and identity through sculpture, installation, video, and performance. Belmore was Canada's official representative at the 2005 Venice Biennial. The bloodied scar across an Indigenous woman's back is the central focus of Rebecca Belmore's Fringe. By denying the subject's face and sexuality, Belmore subverts the reclining nude common to Western art. Instead, she confronts the viewer with the weight of the colonial burden First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities continue to bear. I will never forget driving along Montreal streets to La Centrale Galerie Powerhouse, a local arts hub, and catching sight of a billboard that made me turn around and go back to see it again. I knew it was not an ad, I thought, but the work of Rebecca Belmore. It was the whiteness of the sheets which made the red beads that hung down the back of a First Nations woman stand out. It was the casualness of the pose of a woman bearing a massive deep scar along her back, stitched and adorned with the fringe of beads. The beauty of Belmore's work lies in the bareness of the image, a complex thought stripped to its essential. Her images are never cluttered with the unnecessary. They are not history lessons, but experiences and provocations. I wanted to look forever, but it's a billboard and we were driving. I recognized the way the beads hung as a symbol of First Nations clothing, a sign of tradition, but also of change and endurance. The scar was disturbing, but the woman was not a victim. You could feel that she was something more than this scar. Her back was turned to us. She refused to be an object of our gaze or pity. I have felt like her many times. Some of us wear our scars on the surface, which can make us targets, and some of us are good at hiding them, that people forget what we have been through. Someone's loving hands, like many Indigenous women's hands before, have helped heal this woman's scars. I thought of all the Indigenous women's scars that come from being relegated to the fringes of society. Even there we can make community and we beautify our world as much as we can. A note. Rebecca Belmore's Fringe was on Duke Street in Old Montreal and was included in the 2007 edition of Mois de la Photo. The billboard was exhibited until 2011. Wanda Nanabush is an Anishinaabe image and word warrior, curator, and community organizer from Beausoleil First Nation. Nanabush is the first curator of Indigenous art at the Art Gallery of Ontario and teaches graduate courses at OCAD, University of Toronto. For more work by Rebecca Belmore, please visit RebeccaBelmore.com. The following piece is by Soto artist Wally Dion. It is called Shield Wall and was created in 2008. The mixed media installation stands at 157.5 by 345.5 by 96 centimeters. Wally Dion, born in 1976 in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, is a visual artist living and working in Binghamton, New York. He is a member of Yellow Quill First Nation, Soto. Throughout much of his career, Dion's work has contributed to a broad conversation in the art world about identity and power, and can be interpreted as part of a much larger Pan-American struggle by Indigenous peoples to be recognized culturally, economically, and politically by settler societies. Utilizing large-scale portraiture, found object sculpture, site-specific installation, and kinetic sculpture, Dion has expanded upon this practice to include themes of personal history and spirituality. Wally Dion's Shield Wall speaks to growing tensions in Canada and the world at large, where non-violence and community action are essential in resolving conflict. Constructed with circuitry boards arranged in patterns that reference Plains First Nations, designed on traditional quilts and blankets, Shield Wall creates a protective barrier spanning over 3 meters. Composed of 6 star shields that resemble riot shields, when taken together, the installation asserts mobility and empowerment through communication, knowledge, education, and unity. The piece was created in response to the protests and counter-protests surrounding the untimely death of Matthew Shepard, a gay youth who was targeted, robbed, and beaten to death. When anti-gay members of the Westboro Baptist Church picketed Shepard's funeral and the trial of his attackers, Shepard's friends created a protective barrier between the protests and Shepard's family by constructing large angel wings made from white sheets. For more work by Wally Dion, please visit wallydion.com. The last piece is called This Is Our Time. It was created in 2013 by Cree Sioux Métis artist Jim Logan. Jim Logan began his art career by painting social statement pieces from his own experience as a lay minister in Kwanlundun village on the outskirts of Whitehorse, Yukon Territory. Most recently, he has been interested in art history and comparing it to Aboriginal art history, as well as adding computer art to the many mediums he practices. Jim Logan is a founding member and captain of the Métis Art Council, former co-chair of the Society of Canadian Artists of Native Ancestry, and a recipient of the British Columbia Aboriginal Arts Award and 2 Canada Council Awards. The following is a quote by the artist. This was painted during the Idle No More heightened demonstrations to bring into awareness the never-ending list of social, economic, and environmental inadequacies towards Aboriginal people by the Harper government. It refers to our young people. It is their time to stand up and make a difference because it will be them who must endure these inadequacies the longest. There was a major demonstration in Ottawa at Parliament Hill. I was away at the time, but I recall it was snowing, and I thought about the children there with their parents and how they will remember that day. I thought about the children in Attawapiskat and the children of Kwanlundun in Whitehorse, and I wanted a simple image addressing complex issues that are generational. The band-aid on the child's face can symbolize many things, from bad water on reserves to domestic abuse at home. All in all, it's the children who must survive and react, so this painting is for them. We were all children at one time. We all have suffered from inadequacies. I am praying for them to continue the struggle towards equality and for more happiness and prosperity for our people. End quote by Jim Logan. Curriculum links. Expressing Indigenous cultures. The exhibition raises awareness of the breadth and scope of Indigenous artwork being produced today. Students will analyze connections between art and society and consider the role of contemporary Indigenous artists in shaping societal perceptions of identity, culture, and common values. Students will come to appreciate the many ways art is deployed as a means for promoting dialogue to deepen an understanding of histories that affect Indigenous communities. And they will be able to identify how new and evolving art forms reclaim, revive, and sustain Indigenous cultures through material, technique, symbolism, and message. Indigenous Peoples in Canada. Many of the artworks in the exhibition raise awareness of Canadian government policies that have affected Indigenous identity in the 20th century. Barry Pottle's Awareness series addresses the Eskimo identification tag system, while Nadia Mayer's Meditations on Red series raises questions about the burden of proof of identity through blood and official status as Native. Tania Willard's Be a Good Girl and Rachel Lafon's Pangnirtung, There's My Grandmother, speaks to the impact of residential schools. Students will come to understand the impact that technological developments have had on Indigenous society during the later half of the 20th century. Kwamutujwak, Snowmobile, by Ohotak Mikigak, makes reference to the common usage of snowmobiles in Inuit communities, replacing the traditional use of dog and sled teams. Elisipi Ishlutak's Bridge in Pangnirtung addresses the challenges of engineering projects in the far north with respect to global warming. Both Barry Ace and Wally Dion integrate computer circuitry and first world waste with traditional patterns and art forms to explore ideas of cultural continuity in a technological age. Indigenous beliefs, values, and aspirations in contemporary society. The artwork in the exhibition demonstrates how contemporary Indigenous artists are asserting their autonomy through a blend of traditional and modern practices as a foundation for self-determination. Students will identify examples of artworks that open a dialogue about sovereignty, self-determination, and self-government, depict a spiritual or emotional link to traditional lands and territories, demonstrate how communities respond to technological and environmental changes, and arise from models of economic growth and political growth, for example, Inuit art cooperatives. Current Indigenous issues in Canada. Several of the artworks in Raise a Flag are made as a response to current events. Students will identify the social, political, and economic challenges being addressed by individuals and communities in Canada. Tanya Harnet's Sweet Scared, Sacred Water brings attention to contaminated bodies of water on Albertan reservations. Mark Iglor-Liorti's Untitled speaks to the epidemic of suicides among the Innu and Inuit peoples of Labrador, as well as First Nations across Canada. And Jim Logan's This Is Our Time engenders awareness and solidarity for the Idle No More movement. Students will also be exposed to artworks that reflect the contemporary Indigenous experience, informed and influenced by media and popular culture. This concludes the audio guide. From myself and everyone at Onsite, thank you for tuning in.